Okay, so today's video is going to be very similar to the last video that I ended up recording, mainly because there's not really much news going on in the Save the World department. The only stuff that we know is actually coming to the game is the fact that the locker system with the skins and back blings should be implemented within the next 2 to 3 days. That is, of course, you know, if Epic Games doesn't delay it again. So if they don't do that, we should have some pretty interesting stuff to look at within the next few days. But today's video, I want to do something very similar. Now, with the last one, we ended up doing a tier list on bows and arrows, because Epic Games did a huge buff to a lot of the weapons in the game, and they updated them and basically made them a lot better than they were previously. We did the whole tier list for every single bow in the game, including crossbows. Well, today we're going to be doing something very similar with shotguns, except for I want to condense it down a little bit and only focus on really 3 main weapons with a few honorable mentions here and there. If you guys are curious on how shotguns were affected, here's a whole list of every shotgun in the game and the damage differences that they received from one update to the next, and I have a pretty spicy top 3 for you guys of shotguns that you definitely need to check out. And if I'm not mistaken, every single one of these can be researched in the collection book, so it's really good for newer players. For older players that want to try something new, you might find this interesting as well. And I do want to give a quick shout out to Rounded Tic Tac, because he did a lot of testing with shotguns specifically, and he has a whole video going over every single one of them. So after you get done watching this video, if you want to go check his out, link will be in the description. Now, before I do jump into it, quick shout out to Ali for using my code at gfuel.com and supporting the channel. I appreciate your face, man. And without further ado, let's get talking about some shotguns. Okay, so before we actually jump into this list and start talking about these shotguns, why they're so good, etc., I do want to mention that I did make this list a little bit categorized to help make things more simple. Starting out with the number 3 spot, I'm going to have an AoE shotgun, which is an area of effect. You know, it can kill multiple enemies in one shot, and you know how good it is with that. For number 2, I have a single target shotgun, which is basically, you know, a shotgun that you want to use to kill a single enemy with a high health bar. And then at number 1, I'm going to have basically the best of both worlds, a jack of all trades, one that can do both pretty damn well. Now, just because one is in the number 1 spot, one is at the number 2, and one is at the number 3, I do want to mention that every single shotgun that's going to be mentioned in today's video has a very specific use that is better than the other shotguns in the list. So just because one might be at number 3, that doesn't mean that it's, you know, inherently so much worse than the ones at number 2 and number 1, because every single one of these shotguns is capable of doing something that the other shotgun might not be able to do, or might not be able to do as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first thing that I want to mention, which is the hero loadout, which is Buckshot Raptor, because he gives the best damage overall whenever it comes to shotguns. Totally rocking out will give us, it's pretty much the best damage team perk in the game. We also have Subwoofers, Battle Beat, Locked and Reloaded for damage after reload, Shell Shock for shotgun damage in general, and Plasma Arc for chaining damage, because I absolutely love Cyberclops. He really should have been a mythic. So let's go and jump into it. Start things off at number 3, and for number 3 we have the Vendor Tech Disintegrator. This is a weapon that I have always thought of as an absolute beast of a weapon, and for some reason, with, you know, this whole 12.0 update, Epic Games thought it was a good idea to buff this thing even more, so they ended up bringing it from 135 base damage to 225 base damage. And I gotta say, I ended up going into a solo RTD mission, and I just kind of really didn't build any traps whatsoever, and I wanted to see how much, you know, mayhem I could cause in a 4x mission by myself, and using this thing against endless swarms of husks was absolutely invigorating, and it just felt like a shockwave every single time I shot it. The perks that I have on this weapon is energy, crit damage, crit rating, and damage to afflicted targets with causes affliction. The best perk for that last one would be snare, but I wasn't lucky enough to get a snare. I even researched one from the collection book to see if I could get it, and I just ended up getting another affliction one. But if you're trying to get the best case scenario with this weapon, definitely go for a snare one, because slowing enemies is a really good utility. And because this weapon is an AoE weapon and it can splash damage all over the place and, you know, deal damage to a lot of enemies, if they do survive, you do want them slowed, and the Vendor Tech Disintegrator does a fantastic job of just hitting pretty much anything on screen whenever you end up using it. The main thing I really like about this weapon is not only because it does have that AoE factor, but it is actually very capable of doing single target damage, although not as well as some other weapons. You can easily take down a smasher with just like 3 to 4 shots, you know, if you're lucky with your crits, you know, 4 to 5 if you're not. It's a very, very good shotgun overall. It just kind of suffers a little bit from a little bit low crit chance, but this weapon isn't a single target weapon to begin with. Whenever you do shoot a crowd of enemies, each enemy in and of itself is going to have their own crit value and have a chance to be critted on, so the more enemies that you shoot at once, the higher of a chance you have to actually crit on them. And this weapon is just really, really, really fun to use. You know, why Epic Games ended up buffing its damage, I have no idea, but because they did it, this weapon is even way better than it was previously, and I just love being able to shoot in the general direction of a husk and still end up killing it, as well as other husks around it, without even having to put in much effort. The Devender Disintegrator, in my opinion, is one of the kings of AoE, and it's always been one of my favorite shotguns in the game. A definite spot in number 3 as a really good shotgun overall. Now, moving on to the number 2 spot, of course, we have the single target shotgun. And for this spot, we end up having this weapon that I'm going to talk about soon, as well as an honorable mention. They both do something really good, but the first one I'm going to mention definitely has some nice utility to it. I'm, of course, talking about the Helium Shotgun. This is yet another energy weapon, and this thing absolutely slaps. I love this weapon so much. I picked this weapon up after watching Tic Tac's video, and I'm like, dude, this thing's amazing. I ended up rolling it with energy, crit rating, damage, crit damage, damage to afflicted, and causes affliction. Again, you probably want to go with snare, but this thing's a beast. It does insane amounts of damage up close because, well, it is a shotgun. It basically shoots one big bolt out of it, a bolt of energy that ends up disappearing after a certain amount of range, so you do want to get close. The very interesting thing about the Helium Shotgun is that it is able to pierce enemies, and that's the utility that I'm talking about, that the, you know, honorable mention isn't necessarily going to have as much, but the Helium Shotgun does very well. You know, Epic Games ended up buffing this weapon by over 100 base damage. It went from 206 to 310, and this thing absolutely slaps now. For a while, it used to be one of the better guns in the game, and then it kind of fell off as more shotguns came out. Now the Helium Shotgun's finding itself at another rise and starting to rise back up to the top. Would I consider it the king of shotguns? For me personally, it's a very good single target shotgun overall, but sometimes it can be a bit repetitive to use if you've been using it for a long time, seeing as it only does shoot a little bit of a bolt and you have to focus your aim a little bit more. But being able to use this thing against something like smashers, against mini bosses, it does have a little bit of projectile speed to it, but because you're up close, it's not that big of a deal. And, you know, dealing out, you know, millions of damage per shot and being able to hit enemies behind the initial one that you're shooting at is a pretty great utility to have overall, and I absolutely love this weapon. Now, for the honorable mention, I do want to mention the Double Boiler. The Double Boiler is the steampunk shotgun, and it's very similar in a lot of ways to the Helium Shotgun. The last perk that it has is on hit, the bullet will splinter into shrapnel, and to my knowledge and from, you know, my usage of the weapon, the shrapnel isn't too crazy overall, but the Double Boiler has a little bit of a one-up on the Helium Shotgun by having a little bit more critical hit chance that the, you know, Helium does not have. The Helium makes up for it by being able to hit multiple enemies in one shot, but the Double Boiler is a nice change of pace to be able to have a shotgun, you know, 2 shots in the mag and be able to consistently get out a shot every now and again. It's just whenever you don't crit with the Double Boiler, it kind of does hurt, and when you don't crit with the Helium Shotgun, at the very least you can kill some trash behind whatever you're trying to shoot at. So Double Boiler, great honorable mention if you don't have the Helium, and the Helium Shotgun is just a fantastic single target weapon with some added utility to it. It's a very good single target, definitely check it out. Now, moving on to the number 1 spot, this is a weapon that I've been using a ton over on twitch.tv, and if you guys watch the streams, you know exactly what this weapon's about to be since it's a shotgun. I considered making this, you know, a video on its own about this weapon in particular. I, of course, am talking about the military set shotgun known as the Ground Pounder. This weapon right here is an absolute monster whenever it comes to clearing out hordes, whenever it comes to killing single targets, even whenever it goes up against mini bosses. This thing is a fantastic weapon. The rolls that I have on it are crit damage, damage, energy, crit rating, damage to slowed and snared, and damage dealt with this weapon snares the target by 30%. This is a excellent best of both worlds jack of all trades, as not only does it have really high fire rate to be able to, you know, burst down a lot of health, but it also does have a pretty decent spread whenever you're using it to hit multiple enemies at a time. And this weapon just has the fire rate, it has the spread, it has the damage. It's a really good weapon overall, and for some reason Epic Games buffed this weapon from 107 to 206 base damage, where the Ground Pounder was already a very high-end shotgun on the spectrum, and they made it even better with this most recent patch. I absolutely love the ground pounder. It looks excellent with wraps. It goes excellent against mini bosses, high health targets, groups of enemies. You can, you know, of course, research it from the collection book as well, and it's of course a part of the military set, which is definitely a huge fan favorite. Now, if you don't have the ground pounder and you're unable to research it, or for some reason you can't get your hands on one, the honorable mention in this department, of course, is the Tiger Jaw. And the Tiger Jaw is very similar, high rate of fire, can clear out some crowds, as well as can clear out some, you know, big high health enemies as well. And the Tiger Jaw is actually a base game shotgun that ended up getting buffed pretty heftily. So if you don't have the ground pounder, or you're not a fan of the ground pounder, the Tiger Jaw is a definite honorable mention in this category for best of both worlds, or, you know, jack of all trades. Both of these weapons are absolutely fantastic, as well as both of the weapons that we mentioned previously and the weapon that we mentioned for AoE. Vendor Disintegrator is perfect for clearing out crowds. The Helium Shotgun is perfect for clearing out stuff with a very high health bar, and the ground pounder is perfect for pretty much any scenario that you're in. You have a smasher rushing towards you, burst them down. You have a group of enemies coming at you, burst them down. You have a mini boss, he's no problem. The ground pounder is an excellent overall weapon, and the greatest thing about it is that I've been maining constructors a lot, and using the ground pounder with absolutely no shotgun buffs is an absolute amazing weapon on its own. You don't even need to buff this weapon for it to perform great, and that's what I absolutely love about it. It's very consistent, does very good damage, and can really help you out in a pinch. The ground pounder, in my opinion, is a definite #1 weapon you need to check out, and that's pretty much going to top it for my top 3 shotguns, as well as 2 honorable mentions that you definitely need to check out with this newest patch whenever it comes to buffing all these weapons. But guys, that's pretty much it for me. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below about the weapons that I mentioned. For me personally, the ground pounder and the Vendor Disintegrator are probably my personal favorites from everything that I mentioned. The Vendor Disintegrator is definitely the funnest weapon to use on this list. If any of you guys have anything to add about these weapons, or maybe you have a shotgun that you personally really like, definitely make sure to leave your opinions and your thoughts in the comments down below. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you guys next time.